Hello and welcome to Bridges and Gap. I'm your host, Todd Johnson, and we're so glad to be in your homes today. We have a great show in store for you. My first guest, without any further ado, Dr. Michael Barry, who's Director of Pastoral Care at the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Dr. Barry, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be with you.
Dr. Barry, the idea of cancer, I know many, many years ago, the big city, as they would call it, was a thing where people would not want to talk about or not want to admit to and so forth. But cancer over the years is not the death sentence that it once was. Could you share with us what your organization does as it relates to people who are dealing with cancer, or families and churches?
Well, sure. I'm the Director of Pastoral Care at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and we are in Northeast Philadelphia, and we offer integrative cancer treatment to patients. We have patients that come from as far as 300 to 500 miles away. We have done our patient surveys and learned that well over 90% of our patients are very satisfied with the care that they're getting. And so it's not only a great place to serve patients, but it's a great place to work as well. So it's a joy to be able to serve people who are in such great need.
Now, how did you get involved in the work that was it personal? Or?
Well, I was in parish ministry for 18 years, serving churches around the country until I felt a sense of call to come to Philadelphia, leaving Chicago and the church there. And I was charged actually by the leadership to begin a forgiveness education curriculum. The first duty of anyone in healthcare, Todd, is to listen and respond to your patients. And I was listening to my patients. And so often, no surprise I'm sure to you, that so often what I heard were people telling stories about things that had happened in their past that they hadn't healed from. And the question then is, how do you help people who are suffering from those kinds of emotional wounds? And so much of my time over the last 7 years has been developing a forgiveness education program, which we call Release, the Healing Power of Forgiveness. And then we're taking it all over the East Coast to a wide range of organizations, agencies, and so forth. So listening to people, tell their stories, and then responding as we can. First duty of healthcare.
Now, I know when it comes to cancer, we often think of the physical treatment that comes with it, but there's an emotional piece too. What would you say your center does to deal with the emotional stress that might come from?
My department meets with each new patient that comes to our hospital, and we spend 30 to 45 minutes with them, talking specifically with them about what we consider to be very important topics. The most important topic for someone who has cancer is hope. And so again, we've listened to our patients, we've responded, we've developed a program designed to help increase people's levels of hope without giving them false hope. We're not trying to promise something that we can't provide. And so as we've listened to them, we've heard them talk about hope and found very specific ways to be able to increase the level of hope.
Now, speaking of hope and cancer, those are two terms that don't always seem to be congruent, but you're telling me that your center offers hope for those who perhaps many people would say don't have much hope.
So let me tell you a story of a patient by the name of Kathy. Kathy came to us. She had been given 3 months to live by another cancer center in the Midwest. She came to us, and I'd like to say that Kathy is still living. She died on Christmas Eve a little over a year ago. But she lived over 5 years. And what I've learned, Todd, is the difference between 3 months and 5 years, if it's your life, it's a lifetime.
Yes, it is.
And so while some of our patients, perhaps more than a few, don't ultimately survive their disease, we're not only concerned about providing cures, which of course we would like, but we're also focused on creating long periods of remission. And Kathy experienced over 5 years of good, healthy, high quality of life, and so it's just great to be able to walk alongside Kathy during that time.
Now, you said forgiveness education. Could you kind of elaborate on that briefly, what that entails?
Well, what we've learned, Todd, is that there's a high cost to hatred. As we talk to our patients, we listen to them, when we heard them, very often tell us their stories about things that have happened in the past. Perhaps it was a healthcare professional that they felt had let them down. But the trick or the challenge that I had was that 8 years of formal theological education had not prepared me to help them learn how to forgive. I would tell people to forgive every week. I mean, that's what preachers do. But I've learned that it's not that easy. And so we have developed a very specific program to help people find forgiveness. Now, the importance of that is unforgiveness, we understand as a state of chronic anxiety. When we withhold the anger and hatred within us, that creates stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol. I won't get too terribly involved, but what it does is dampen your immune system. And so while I'm not saying that unforgiveness causes cancer, and I'm not saying forgiveness is going to cure it, I am saying the very same thing that the National Institute of Health says, which is this: psychological stress can facilitate the growth and the spread of cancer. The reason it can facilitate the growth and the spread of cancer is because your immune system can't fight the disease.
Right.
So in helping our patients deal with their emotional wounds, we're also helping to increase their immune system so that everything else that we're doing, whether it's chemotherapy or radiation, whether it's surgery, whatever the other treatment might be, stands the best chance of creating the best possible health outcome for them.
Now, in layman's terms, I guess that would be keeping a positive attitude, sort of lessens the chance of the spread of the disease of cancer.
Well, we are, at our hospital, we have a wide range of religions that are there reflecting the East Coast. I like to refer to myself as a possibilitarian. We think that all things are possible. And as people come in and they might feel depressed or sad or feeling hopeless, we attempt to try and not only lift their spirits, to give them very realistic reasons to have hope. And then as that, they unfold like flowers, and we see amazing things happen. One of our passions, Todd, is very often we will see people come to us who other hospitals have given up on. They've given up on. And that's not good enough for us. And so we provide healing and hope and create, hopefully, a healing environment for good things to happen.
Now, off camera, we were talking earlier, and I was just intrigued when you were talking about a caregiver's clinic. Could you just expound on that briefly, what that might entail? Because people like myself and others who are caregivers for individuals.
I've written a book on caregiving, so I know a little bit about it. It's perhaps not a great book, but here's what I've learned. Caregivers experience more stress and more depression than the patients themselves. And so what we're trying to do with our caregivers is to make sure that they also have a high quality of life. Because if they don't do well, then ultimately that's going to be a disservice to their patients. I'm on the job 8 hours a day. They're on it 24/7, as you well know. And so what we're attempting to begin the process of seriously considering is having a caregiver clinic so that when caregivers come into our hospital, they experience a parallel path to wellness. So any of the modalities that we offer are currently, for the most part, available to caregivers anyway, but we want to make sure that whatever they need, their needs are being met.
Now, interestingly enough, I think of cancer, and I may think in very prehistoric terms like many, but there's been so much awareness and a level of education has increased about the different kinds of cancers and the treatments and so forth. Do you have a success story of a person who had cancer and the cancer went to remission and they went on and lived a productive life? Because I've heard that watching TV shows and so forth, but is that real, that really happened?
My first experience with CTCA was in Zion, Illinois, when I was pastoring a church there. Did some part-time pastoral care there. I met a gentleman who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which is a very aggressive disease, and by any stretch of the imagination, a very difficult disease to get on top of. I met with him. I prayed with him. He availed himself of the resources that we had to have. That was 7 years ago. Today, he is still walking, and he's on this side of the ground and living a healthy life. Now, I can't, and I'm not in a position to say that that's going to be everyone's health outcome, but I am telling you that very often people give up, when in reality there are lots of things that can be done. And it's tragic. They've done research on the personality of cancer patients, and it's often called type C personality. Type C stands for cancer, but you can kind of crystallize it into the idea of chronic niceness. Many cancer patients are extremely nice. Some of the nicest people you ever want to meet would be at our hospital. But the thing is that chronically nice people don't like to argue. They want to keep all that stuff inside, which creates the chronic anxiety I mentioned to you earlier. But if a doctor tells someone who doesn't like to argue that there's nothing more that can be done, go home and get your affairs in order, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go home and get their affairs in order. And so it's important as a caregiver to make sure that, indeed, you're walking beside somebody that you know and love has cancer, because it may very well be that they're really struggling with some of those issues in terms of pushing against the system and getting that second opinion. I mean, my advice, by the way, would be get two opinions and then treat where you trust.
Okay. Now, just very quickly, the Cancer Center Treatments of America, if somebody's watching you in this program, how would they get in touch with them? Is there a phone number, website?
Sure, they can get in touch with me through the ourjourneyofhope.com website, ourjourneyofhope.com, or through the hospital, cancercenter.com.
Okay. And the Cancer Center Treatments of America, that's all over the country, is that correct?
We have 5 hospitals in all over the country, absolutely.
That's great. Well, the service that you provide, and as well as the care that you provide for cancer patients and their families, I just take my hat off to you. I know that's a challenging work, but it's also probably very rewarding for you. So for me and the others who are watching you from the sidelines, we continue to support you and the great work that you're doing at the Cancer Center Treatments of America. I want to thank you for appearing on our show, and now we're going to go and pay some bills, as they say in the business. But don't you go away. We'll be right back.